Now, the Twin Cities' fastest-growing television news, News 11 Sunrise, with John Stone, Amy Powell, Steve Carroll on sports, and meteorologist Andre Bernier.
Well, Tom, since leaving KARE 11 in 1988, both my wife and I moved to Cleveland, and we've been here ever since. And it was a great opportunity because this was Sally's hometown here in Cleveland. So when an opportunity came available here at Channel 8, originally was a CBS affiliate, I applied for the job. It was for the weekday mornings. They were just starting a weekday morning show. And having been on the weekday morning show and enjoying it, sent a tape to Dick Goddard, who was the chief meteorologist. He brought it into the news director, and it probably was no more than a week or two later, I was actually on my way back to Minneapolis on a flight with a contract offer, and so we've been here in Cleveland ever since. It's 21 years and still going as of 2009. Well, Tom, before coming to KARE 11 in 1985, both Sally and I were living in Atlanta, Georgia, and for a time both of us were actually at the Weather Channel, and that's where I was for the entire 3 years from 1982 to 85, and that's where Sally initially got her start too, behind the scenes first, then on the air. Well, CNN got a hold of her and watched her. They liked her and made her an offer. And for a little while, she moved over to CNN. But after a couple of years of living in the Deep South without any season changes, we both decided that a change of scenery was due. So we both started looking for positions. And it just so happened that KARE 11 was looking and took a fancy to Sally. And so they gave her an offer, and I said, let's go. And so we ended up coming to Minneapolis for a number of years. Well, as for myself, prior to coming to KARE 11 as a full-time employee, I was actually working for Weather Radio 1280, WWTC, for a little while. After that, went to work for Northwest Airline and as a transatlantic flight meteorologist, all the while doing some fill-in from time to time at KARE 11. But the opportunity came about shortly after Sally and I were married to try this thing called the Weather Couple. And it was actually born as a result of a kind of a funny or fake promo that we put together where both of us were arguing as husband and wife in the promo. And it got to the news director, then Tom Kirby, and he looked at it and said, that looks interesting. Let's try it. Let's give this a go. And so in September of 1987, the Weather Couple concept really took off, where I was out in the backyard and Sally was indoors. In fact, it was interesting to note that when we were developing this idea and getting this thing together, Tom Kirby said, well, one of you has to be outside, one of you has to be inside. Who's going to be outside? Sally, without even batting an eye, pointed to me and said, he is. And so she wanted me to be out there experiencing the cold. Of course, I didn't mind it. I thought the concept was great, and it took off from there. Well, Tom, I can truly and honestly say that it was probably the most fun newsroom I have ever worked in, and certainly Channel 8 here in Cleveland is right up there. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here for 21 years. But those 3 years off and on at KARE, and of course the last couple of months full-time, phenomenal opportunities, great people, and yeah, it was a family environment and just tons and tons of fun. What you saw on the air is essentially what was going on behind the scenes, even when the cameras were not on. Truly an amazing place. Well, Tom, there are a number of memories that come straight up to the top, but if I could, I'd run out of tape with listing all of them. So I'll just name a couple of them. Would be the tornado that occurred on the north side of Minneapolis in the mid-1980s. Max Messmer, helicopter pilot, was out there doing it live. I was actually sick home that day. I had the flu. Took a 2-hour nap, got up right around 5 o'clock, turned on the TV to watch KARE 11 News at 5, and I see this tornado. I'm thinking, wow, this must be a twister from Kansas or Oklahoma. And then I see the 11 bug live going up. That can't be. Here in Wyzetta, which is where we live, we had sun beaming into our living room. And then I thought, well, let me look north. I looked across the northern window, and it was as black as night. And realized that, wow, I was really missing a great day to be working. Here I am, stuck at home, sick as a dog, watching a tornado on the north side of Minneapolis. The other thing that comes to mind immediately is Paul Douglas got conked on the head with a canoe. It was a Friday night. We had a lot of guests on Friday night. And so I got to see that live, along with many other things that were always memorable and always just great fun. Well, yes, actually, there have been a number of times where people have remembered us from Minneapolis that are now living in Cleveland. I can remember one in particular. Sally and I had just moved to Cleveland. It was really in the summer of 1988, that very, very hot year here in Ohio. In fact, we set our all-time record high that year. It was June 25th, 1988. We hit 104 degrees. Never been that hot in Cleveland. And Sally was still up in Minnesota trying to sell the house. We finally got together, moved into our new place here in the summer of '88, and we started getting correspondence from a couple that had just moved from Minneapolis to here. And they were just tickled that we were both in Cleveland and doing television in Cleveland. Sally was part-time here. I was full-time. For a little while after that, Sally got a full-time gig and job offer at WUAB, the Independent here in Cleveland. So she was the chief meteorologist for 7 years before coming back here to Fox 8. And so just recently, Sally fully retired from TV, January 1, 2009. And that after an additional 12-year run here at Fox 8 after being at UAB for 7. So it was kind of fun. Occasionally we would get letters from people either visiting or have transplanted or moved from Minneapolis to Cleveland saying, hey, I remember you, and that was always a great deal of fun. Well, Tom, every place has its idiosyncrasies as far as weather goes, and whether you're in Cleveland or Boston or Salt Lake City, San Diego, as boring as the weather is in San Diego, it has idiosyncrasies too. And so the distinct differences between Minneapolis and Cleveland are twofold. Number one, the extremes in the temperature in Minneapolis, both seasonally and diurnally, are much greater than they are in Cleveland. And the reason is that we are so close to Lake Erie. Lake Erie acts as a buffer. But it also adds that element for lake effect snow, which can really throw a monkey wrench into the works. It makes forecasting extremely difficult in the wintertime when forecasting the amounts of snow, especially on the east side. You can get crazy amounts like snowfall forecast anywhere from a trace to up to 24 inches tonight. And trying to pinpoint backyards is literally impossible. As our chief meteorologist likes to say, it's like nailing jelly to the wall or putting socks on a rooster or trying to flush ping pong balls down the toilet. You just can't do any of those things. It's a lot like lake effect forecasting, but Minneapolis had other quirks and distinct differences too that we had to get used to. So every place has its idiosyncrasies, and that off the top of my head is probably the biggest one. Our being a modified atmosphere because of the lake, Minneapolis much more in the terms of extreme warm, extreme cold, and seasonally and even daytime. Oh, Tom, there's absolutely no doubt that that Paul set the tone for a creative way to do the weather in Minneapolis, and that was the KARE 11 backyard. When I first saw that, I thought, what a great concept. It is phenomenal. So when coming to Cleveland, little by little, we began to try things, experiment. We had a garden on the side of the station for a little while because we're not quite in the city. We're 55 blocks on East 55th Street on the east side of town. So we had a little bit of room, and we're right on the lake, too, which, is, by the way, makes great television. So we started doing some broadcast outdoors. In the garden, we had a landscaped front yard, which is about to get a makeover at the end of 2009. We're really going to spruce things up this year. We added lights, we added wireless microphones, we added outdoor chroma key, but it didn't happen all in one fell swoop. It was piece by piece, and it was a slow progression here, only because the very same thing that Paul Douglas ran into is that you had to endear the audience to it. As I recall him saying during the recent 25-year anniversary of the Backyard, I think it was, that it was an idea at first that people thought, you got to be crazy doing the weather outside. But when you stop to think about it, it just plain old makes sense. You never get current conditions wrong. You always have a great backdrop. And just like the political reporter stands in front of City Hall, or the sports reporter stands in the stadium even after the game is done, it just makes sense to stick the weather guy outdoors or the weather gal outdoors. And it gives you a lot of visual fodder to play off of. Good example, right here in Cleveland, where we have a great view of Lake Erie behind me. One noontime, I was doing a noon broadcast, and you could actually see behind me a couple of water spouts that were starting to form. Water spouts are very common here in September and October, and sure enough, it was September, conditions were right, and they were not camera shy. As soon as we were on, here come these water spouts right behind me in the front yard. So it's a great concept, and I'm glad that the people of Cleveland kind of took to it too. Well, no doubt, Tom, that Cleveland has been very, very kind to me. And people have always told me that if you can survive in a market for 7 years, if you can get to that magical 7-year mark, there's something almost mystical about it. If you can get there, chances are you're going to be able to stay in that market if you desire for the rest of your career. So very, very fortunate after 21 years. And sure, I think success is cumulative in the sense that you learn things along the way. I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, at the CBS affiliate, which is now KGAN. Learned a lot there. Went to the Weather Channel during its launch years, 1982 to 85. Learned even more there because we had a collection of meteorologists all over the country that you got to talk to and kind of exchange ideas and talk about idiosyncrasies around the country. You learned from each other. From there to KARE 11, and from KARE 11 to Cleveland. So, you know, everything is just an accumulation of knowledge and of experience. Experience is a big part of TV, and probably the biggest thing that I walk away from KARE 11 with is learning to have fun in television. Because if you're having fun doing what you're doing, people will actually see that you're having fun. There's no faking that. You can't fake that. If they see that you're having fun, they're going to enjoy watching you. And so that's what I learned at KARE 11, thanks to Tom Kirby, Paul Douglas, and everybody else that was there. And took that with me here, refined it, and tried to then pass that on to others as they're getting into the business. Whether they're in a small market or passing through. A lot of my interns I try to instill with the idea of get into the work because you love it, you've got a passion for it, and you just don't want to do anything else. If you've got those things, that will translate into how you project yourself on television if eventually that's what you want to do. Well, what are we up to right now? After a 21-year absence from KARE 11 in Minneapolis. Well, Sally and I have a son, Noah, and you would think that between two that he might be interested in the weather. And in a very tangent way he is, but that's not his passion. We've discovered that the Lord has given him a passion for flight. And he is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to planes and knowing about their engines, serviceable ceilings, range, armaments if they're military. And he really has a passion for flight. So for Christmas this year, we gave him a flight lesson that we finally were able to get up into the air in April after the weather got a little bit nicer. Absolutely loves it. Has actually 0.6 hours of dual time, and most recently, 0.3 hours of dual time in a 1943 Stearman biplane, for those of you into aviation. Now, I got my pilot's license back in 1983 before coming to Minneapolis, but have not been current. I really haven't been flying for 20 years. And when I saw my son's passion for flight, I thought this would be a great opportunity to brush the dust off of my aviation license and kind of dust off the old wings and get back in the air again. It took me a little longer because it was 20 years, but just recently passed my biennial flight review, and I'm back in the air. Noah and I are flying places. He's loving it, and I'm also getting instrument flight rated. I'm starting my IFR procedures and IFR rating and schooling. I did that beginning in June of this year, so I hope to be done sometime this fall. And that's really the big, new and exciting thing in our lives today. We still come to Minneapolis from time to time. We've got friends that are still residents of Minnesota. In fact, we'll be up there in the fall of 2009 for a brief visit. We have friends in northern Wisconsin that we go see from time to time. We were with them for Christmas, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago. We still miss Minneapolis. It's near and dear to our hearts. And if you're ever down in the Cleveland area, in the Great Lakes, it's a great vacation spot, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Come on down and make sure you give me a call. I'm at andre.bernier@fox8.com. And don't forget to drop me a line if you come down this way.